Okay, Oscar nuts and Star Wars fans, we have to get to the bottom of this mystery of whether or not this Star Wars, The Force Awakens, will show up on the Oscar list for Best Picture, and even perhaps could it win? We know that in general, franchise films do not do well. There are exceptions, of course. Lord of the Rings, Return of the King ended up winning. Godfather 2 won. This has the curse of sci-fi against it. To this day, no sci-fi movie has ever won Best Picture. Daniel, you've got some interesting insight about a parallel to Avatar here. Pipe in here. So, what do you think is bearing in this situation?
Well, I mean, first and foremost are those reviews. The reviews for this film, compared to Avatar, are fairly actually, on par with Avatar, at least on Metacritic. Metacritic is, a sliding scale of how much critics love a film, and the scores are similar. I think Star Wars: The Force Awakens, as of this moment, I think it's around 81, and Avatar was 83. And then you've got Rotten Tomatoes, which is grades on a pass and fail, either rotten or fresh. And Star Wars: The Force Awakens actually has a much higher score than Avatar did. It's in the high 90s or the mid 90s for Star Wars, and I think it was in the mid to low 80s for Avatar, which sort of indicated that film was a little bit more divisive. A little bit, there were more people who disliked that than dislike Star Wars. It's a much better liked film overall, it seems. And that film got in for Best Picture. It got in for Best Director. It won several Oscars below the line, and so we could see a similar situation here. Even though the Oscars don't usually love sci-fi, occasionally they will for the right one, and it has a chance. At least just on the basis of those reviews.
Now with the year of Avatar is significant because there were actually 2 sci-fi movies nominated for Best Picture that year. If you also count District 9. Paul, pipe in here.
Well, right, and that was, of course, a fixed 10. We don't have that anymore. We've got the sliding number of Best Picture nominees. I look at our charts and I wonder, why are we saying The Martian's going to have 9 nominations and a win for Ridley Scott? Why? And yet we don't have Star Wars, according to the experts, in our Best Picture lineup yet. And I think we're being very short-sighted. I mean, you have to remember, like you said, the original got nominated for Best Picture back in 1977. Well, guess what, gang? Lots of Oscar voters now were probably members of the Academy then. Okay, this is an older group. They are going to go to this Star Wars, whether it was those packed Academy screenings this weekend, or in the theaters with their grandchildren. They're going to be so nostalgic. It's the same reason we're saying Sly Stallone is a real credible threat for supporting actor for reprising Rocky. That warm, fuzzy feeling you get when you're watching Star Wars. I mean, the cheers that come up when various people from the first trilogy appear in this one, in the theater. And, Daniel, we all saw it with a hardened media types, and they were applauding and cheering. People are going to really embrace this, and certainly Hollywood is a business. $250 million at the box office this weekend in America, another $300 million around the world. When they're voting for the Oscars starting, on December 30th, I mean, it's going to be it's going to be probably over $1 billion already. I mean, that's what propelled Avatar into the Best Picture race. It was a phenomenon that you just couldn't ignore. And I think you're going to have the same with Star Wars.
2/3 of the people who've seen Star Wars: The Force Awakens are men. 2/3 of them are over the age of 25.
That's right.
So I mean, we're talking about this really kind of lines up with the Oscar voter demographic, which is even much older than that, of course. But
yeah.
The point Paul's making is that old geezers like me, who remember the original Star Wars experience, there was nothing like it. Today we take these tentpole pop culture things for granted, but back then the first Star Wars was something that we had never, ever seen at American movies before.
And, right, the repeat viewings,
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So now with Marcus, you're born, I think, probably after even Return of the Jedi came out in theaters. So what do you think Tom and I need to get our smelling salts out? I mean, does it seem legitimate to a kid like you that this could be in the Oscar lineup?
It's interesting because I did not like the original trilogy. I did not like the trilogy from the
Oh,
2000s.
come on. You have no soul.
Well, let him finish.
Jeez.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
So I went into this with a different mindset than everyone else. I thought I was going to just, like it, maybe not like it. But I saw it with Chris, and I think Chris was most interested to see what I thought. I loved it. Best movie of the year. I immediately put it on my number one for my personal rankings, not my Oscar rankings, just what I liked this year. My favorite movie of the year. I'm seeing it again tonight. It's the only movie of 2015 I'm going to see twice. And I think that's really important because if you guys who like the originals also like these, and then there's cynical Marcus here who also liked this one. I don't know how they did it, but they got the old fans to come back. They got new fans to appreciate it for the first time. I think it's definitely a Best Picture nominee. I think even if there were 5, I think it would get in there.
What do you think, Chris? Because Chris is really, he was our TV guy. Now he's threatening Daniel to be the best predictor when it comes to the Oscars. What do you make of it, Chris?
Well, I don't know about that. Daniel had a great year last year. A lot of things are going through my mind. I'm thinking about the fact that it is going to be all through the Oscar voting period the single most discussed movie. Just people not even talking about Oscars, but just being talked about it. The Christmas parties and talked about at New Year's parties and being seen. It'll be the #1 film at the box office for weeks because there's really nothing else coming out that could top it. But I'm also thinking about how we normally rely on things like Golden Globes and SAG Awards and so forth. They didn't have a chance to see it. Even Critics' Choice, they're debating internally whether now that their people have seen it, should they add an 11th Best Picture nominee, which would be unprecedented. So those things are going through my mind, and I do agree with Avatar, but I'm also thinking back, the movie most recently to be in this situation of being so late to the game was last year with American Sniper, which did get into Best Picture at the Oscars. It really wasn't considered by Globe or SAG voters. They didn't have a chance to see it. But it also got in Clint Eastwood at DGA, who didn't go on to an Oscar nomination, but it was a sign that, hey, this thing is picking up steam. And I'm thinking, most of DGA are TV directors and commercial directors. And J.J. Abrams, that's his whole background. He could possibly get in at DGA, and I think the film is going to get in at PGA for sure, into their 10. So I'm looking at some of those kind of things. I did move it into my top 10 for Oscar predictions. I think I've got it either 9th or 10th right now. But I could certainly see, 5, 6, 7 nominations.
It's going to have, of those #1 votes, it's going to have some from those tech branches, and that's how you get in, of course. Oscar voters rank 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on their Best Picture ballot, even though there's a flexible number from 5 to 10 that actually end up on the list of the nominees. But before we get too carried away here, remember the sci-fi bias is real. Interstellar did not get nominated. The Dark Knight, more fantasy, of course, than sci-fi, did not get nominated.
And the Hobbit movies, too. I think that's a good comparison. You had the original Lord of the Rings, which did really well, and then the 3 Hobbit movies did not do really well.
But then you've got, I just did this item this morning. We're predicting at this moment, according to the experts, who most of whom have not updated to include Star Wars, we're predicting Mad Max will lead with 10 nominations and win 5. And like I said, The Martian is going to get 9 nominations and win for Ridley Scott. I don't understand how Oscar voters could so embrace those 2 pictures and not equally shower some love on Star Wars.
It's illogical. The same thing that permit our experts to believe that they're not making the same allowances for this sci-fi / fantasy movie. No, it's very good. Our experts are not paid by us. They do update their own predictions. We do not go and scratch them from someplace else and put them in our site. So we're dependent on them updating, and I'm constantly nudging the guys. Come on, update. And they're sometimes late. There are some other things happening in the world right now.
Well, like you said to them, Tom, may the Oscar force be with you. They need to at least come back in and say, you know what, I'm not putting it in. And I think, Chris, to your point, if it ends up being a Critics' Choice nominee, which of course we'll add immediately to the prediction center, so people can predict it whether or not it's going to win there, and that's a pretty good barometer.
Well, more than half of our experts are members of Critics' Choice, so that'll hit home with them.
Yeah.
But also remember that this idea of the branches of support across the academy is what is so important here. And the steak eaters, as we call them, is based on what Harvey Weinstein has called them for years. And that's the guys in the film editing and sound mixing and all those tech branches who live out in the Valley, in Glendale, and in Studio City.
And sizable numbers of people. Yeah. Sizable numbers.
Half of the academy.
And it might have an advantage in those fields too, because there's such a big deal made about how J.J. Abrams made this film, taking it away from the all wall-to-wall CGI of the prequels and doing a lot of practical effects, a lot of makeup, a lot of sets, a lot of stuff like that that I think a lot of tech branches will appreciate.
Yeah. Well, we'll know soon, I guess, in a couple of weeks. But for right now, if you want to predict it to win, you can lock in. It's got pretty long odds right now, so this is the time to start putting it into your best picture lineup, all the people watching this, because you're going to get a good payout in terms of points when it inevitably does get a best picture nomination.
Well, inevitably, let's take a show of hands vote among the 5 of us here. Who thinks it will be nominated for best picture?
I do.
We all do. Okay.
Keep in mind, the American Film Institute, they waited to release their list before they wanted to watch the movie first.
The smartest group so far, because the others should have waited.
If other groups had followed that, it would be nominated at all these other groups. So I'm just pay attention to the AFI, what they did.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that it's been a decade since a film released in December or after Thanksgiving has won Best Picture at the Oscars, and that was $1 Million Baby. So the whole derby tends to favor movies with an earlier release, but this Star Wars is proving the exception to every rule.
Yeah.
On that note, update your predictions, Derby. Go to the Prediction Center now and tell us if you think it's going to make the cut. May the Oscar force be with you this holiday season.